Hey guys, welcome back to Close Enough Creations. I'm Nate, and today we're doing part 2 of the Coolster 500 build. Yeah! Okay, well I've been putting it off for as long as I can, but I think it's time to finally take this seat out. So we'll flip the go-kart on its side and rip that sucker out. Okay, so we have the go-kart up on cinder blocks. It's all level. I'm getting ready to chop off a couple pieces back here. I've marked it right there, so that piece is gonna be coming off. This piece up here will be coming off. I'm gonna chop it right here and leave a little nub sticking out, so when I put on more tube, I can sleeve it right over that. That's gonna be coming off flush right there. I wanna build, my own makeshift bar that kind of simulates that curvature. I have a radiator that's gonna be hugging that. So I got a whole bunch of stuff in here. I got my floor jack in there and a couple tires weighting it down because I do have kids and this project's gonna take a while and I don't want them coming out here and, disturbing this thing and shifting it. The last time you guys were watching, we did the exhaust and I welded up this elbow. So that's all complete. Now I can take that and tuck it up to the go-kart and we can start building the roll cage right around that. I got my tube bender all set up. It's a little shifty here. I got 2x4s and 4x4s as the base. I got the GY6 holding it down and a couple gas cans there, but it works. So I can start bending that up. So our next step here is to just start cutting into this frame. Let's get into it. Yep, that just happened. Okay, so our engine is approximately where it's gonna be. It might need to move tick backwards just because I can see it's touching the frame right there where the exhaust is. I got it on cinder blocks on a set of caster wheels so it can move any which way. So I'll move it back a little bit there. What I got going on down here is this is the mount for our swing arm. It's just held there by that magnet. I wanted to put that in there just to show where that pivot point's gonna be. I got our axle up here because I wanted to see how our chain is gonna run. So if you look at the axle here, this is our brake disc mount. And this is the mount for our sprocket. So keep that in mind. Here's our secondary, which is gonna mount above the exhaust. It's on center, it's it's exactly a foot on center away from the primary clutch. So up here by where my thumb is, I'll mount a sprocket that'll go down, down to a jack shaft right here that'll have another sprocket. And that'll run out to our axle. And that's why I have this up here to put that in line with it. So that's how we're gonna run our chain to our axle. The next thing I gotta do is install our carbs and the boots for them. We got new air filters. Once that's done, we can start bending up some tube and finishing up the roll cage on the rear end. Okay, so we're getting ready to put on our new carb boots. I just wanted to show you guys what the old ones look like. So both of them kind of look like this, weather cracked, dry rotted, whatever you want to call it. They're rigid and stiff. That's 20 plus years old. As I pulled out one carb, this one split right in half. So we got new ones. We're gonna put them on. Here's our air filter. They're uni filters. This one's still in the packaging. If you do use uni filters, just be aware that you're supposed to oil them. These are not like stock air filters. They let larger particles by if you don't oil them. You have to clean them routinely too, especially if you're doing riding in dusty conditions like we do. So here are our new air filters. Don't that look pretty? All right, so now we know exactly how much clearance we're gonna need. I might have moved the engine a little bit, but so we can wrap our roll cage around it. That's not too bad, actually. Okay, so we're ready to bend our first pipe. I'm not sure if I'm gonna have enough room because I'm doing almost a 90 on this. This is gonna be the first roll cage that wraps around the back and encases the engine. So I'm gonna be doing two 90s, maybe 80-degree angles. Two 80s with a 2-foot centerpiece. Oh, we're hitting already. Darn. Kind of thought that was gonna happen. Now we have enough room, I hope. Let's keep bending. Okay, so we're ready to make our second bend. I got my level on this side, so when we start bending it, they will be parallel with each other. Okay, we got our first tube bending in the books, and it is not perfect, but it's close enough. Okay, you guys are gonna laugh at me on this one. I got this jig, I guess you'd call it, set up with wood screws, wood, and duct tape. And I know this probably isn't how you guys do it, but this is how I'm doing it. So this bar right here, this part of the roll cage, that's the angle that I'm trying to copy. So I got this thing, I made it a little bit longer than I needed. I wasn't sure how far out I wanted it, but if you look at these air filters, I think that's plenty far right there. So we're gonna chop it right here. I'm gonna try to use my tube notcher. Might be too much of an angle for it, but we're gonna try doing that right there, making this bar parallel, or well, not parallel, but it's gonna be welded right into that bar right there. All right, so let's go notch them. So you can see I have two red lines here. That's where the roll cage is on the buggy. If you hold this up to it, it's roughly 16 degrees. So, over here is my tube notcher that I had to take apart and screw to the bench at a 16-degree angle. So now we can take our segment of tube, throw it in there, and hope our notch comes out good. Okay, so we're making some pretty good progress here. Last night I got the top of the roll cage done. It's tack welded in. The night before that I did this horizontal piece here, or semi-horizontal piece. I had to raise up our engine a good 3.5 inches. These blocks are new, so it's up that much higher. And then I shifted it over maybe an inch because our primary was hanging out a little bit. So it's more centered on the buggy now. I also had to remove a mount over here on our exhaust. It was the stock mount. So the next thing I'm gonna be working on is the engine mount on the bottom end of this cage. I'm running low on tube because I keep screwing up. I'm new to this, so I got a whole bunch of angles down here I'm playing with. Unfortunately, the place I buy my tube from is closed for the coronavirus. So I'm trying to make do with what I got. I got cardboard that I'm using. I'm mocking it up right now. So I got that angle done. I'm gonna be working on an angle here that's gonna go all the way across. This bar is gonna go up right about here. So I'll have one that goes straight like that, and I'll make 2 of those. And then you can see the engine mounts will bolt there and then bolt down to there. I got my engine mounts right there. This stuff is just sitting in there. It's not even tack welded. It's just, I love notches. You know, I love how everything just goes together so, you know, tight. Watch this. Oh yeah, that's just slick. So these are gonna be in line with that. I'm gonna cut a whole bunch of like extra pieces, you know, obviously down here where the engine mounts. So we're running pretty low on tube right now. We got one 10-foot section of 1.5 inch left, and I still have a bunch of work left to do up here. I wanted to put in some extra support bars here, tying those in, you know, maybe put in something around the primary there to protect that, put in something to protect the exhaust down there. Just a whole bunch of, you know, little pieces that add up. So what I'm gonna do with that last section is use it to build whatever I can of the new swing arm. The plan with this swing arm is to use the factory ends here. They have bearings that have been pressed in there. So I'll, you know, chop this off and I'll clean it up and I'll weld that onto the new one. And then we'll use the factory mounts and we'll relocate them down here. I'm not gonna be able to build the swing arm completely, but hopefully we'll be able to build enough where I can get this thing off of the blocks and down on the ground and start playing with the suspension. Speaking of suspension, here are the rear shocks we're using along with a whole bunch of other goodies. These shocks are for a lifted F-150. I'm going to be using them in conjunction with the Indies coilover shocks. Behind it is a 1-inch axle, or at least half of an axle. It came off of the Mega Bike project. It has a 1/4-inch keyway going all the way down the center there. Back here are 1-inch pillow block bearings we'll be using for our jack shafts. Over here are a couple exhaust gaskets. These are all the sprockets we'll be using. They're all number 50. This is an idler sprocket we'll be using as a chain tensioner. I got a couple half links there and 10 feet of number 50 chain. Moving down the table, we got our new aluminum tank. It's a 3¼ gallon, 8x16. Here's our new radiator. It's an aftermarket radiator for a CBR 600RR. There's the Polaris shocks, just to show you a comparison to the stock shocks that were on the Coolster. So before we start bending up some tube for our rear swing arm, we're gonna have to figure out how wide it needs to be. And to do that, we're gonna have to put on our new flange bearings. I forgot to mention these in the last video. These are 30mm bearings, and they replace the stock bearings right here. The reason I got them is they're just beefier, and I'm used to using them. I really like them. So we're gonna install these guys. Just remember that these bearings, just like the pillow block bearings, are self-leveling, which means, I mean, I'm sure you guys know this, but for the people that don't, one can be a little bit lower than the other. They don't have to be in line with each other. The bearings will actually roll inside these carriers and self-align with each other. So with that in mind, make sure that these guys are completely flat or parallel with each other before you start taking measurements. So we're gonna push them all the way up. And we got 24 1/16. All right, so I keep changing my mind on this rear swing arm, mainly because I just don't have enough material to do what I want. So I'm gonna try to use as much of the original swing arm as possible. I'm thinking about making a cut right here and saving this part, getting rid of the cage on top. I have a whole bunch of leftover stuff that's the same diameter here. That's from the back of the roll cage that I can use to extend this out. The end of it is going to be 30 inches from that pivot point. The axle is going to be at the 24-inch mark. I'm also thinking about using some of my 1.5-inch tube and running one parallel with this, maybe, you know, 3-4 inches down, and then hooking back up just to stiffen it up, make it a little bit more rigid. So we got our swing arm all cut up and laid out. The overall dimensions are gonna be 24 inches wide, which is stock, by 31.5 inches long, starting at the pivot point. Our axle is still gonna be on 24 inches from the pivot point. So here's our rotor, just kind of eye it. I left 1.5 inches of clearance behind that rotor. Next, I'm gonna be cutting up the frame right here and chopping that piece off, and cutting up this segment, which was part of the roll cage that was behind the head. And we'll cut that, and this will get welded to there. Same thing on this side here. I'll be chopping this, and there's not enough right here, so I'll be taking in, you know, probably a segment that we chop off from here and putting that in between there. So we got the top portion of the swing arm all fabbed up. Now we can tack weld it together and start working on the bottom. All right, so this is the top half of our swing arm. Now we're gonna make the bottom half. I'm gonna do that out of 1.5" tube. I'm just gonna mirror this exact shape. So I've already calculated out that I need 82 inches to do this. I have 10 feet of pipe left, so I gotta make sure I do it right. Like 90. Okay guys, we did good. It came out great. It fits perfectly. It's completely in line with the top piece. I don't think I mentioned it, but this tube is actually closer to 1.25 inch and this is 1.5 inch. So when you look at it, you can see the 1.5 inch. I made them flush with each other on the outside. So the 1.5 will stick out a little bit on the inside all the way around. You can also see that, here I'm gonna push this back a little bit, that our bends are a little bit different, our 90s. But it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna stitch these guys together and once it's painted, you're not even gonna be able to tell and it's gonna look great. So what I'm trying to do is mimic the top swing arms bend right here. This is a 15-degree bend. And because this piece is gonna be running in parallel with that, I'm gonna do 1.5 inches apart from each other. I need a 45-degree bend up out of this. So it's gonna go 15 degrees in and 45 degrees up. That looks pretty darn good, actually. So we have all of our rear swing arm components complete and laid out. I'm getting ready to tack weld everything together. I just wanted to show you guys stuff before I started doing that. So I made 7 of these spacers. They put 1.5 inch gap between the lower portion and the upper portion of the swing arm. I also made 4 of these mounts. These are for our flanged pillow block bearings. They sit right there. They have a 5/8 inch hole in them. So it lines right up with those. We have this thing notched to receive the upper portion. This was kind of a pain in the butt, guys. Doing this angle and then up was not how I thought it was gonna be. And then I had to hand notch those out. I couldn't use my tube notcher. All right, so let's put this thing together. All right, so the rear swing arm is all tack welded up, and now that it's in place, you can see our exhaust is gonna have to move. There's about 1/2 inch of clearance right now, and if the swing arm comes up any more, it's gonna hit it. We're also gonna have to chop off these mounts. Those are for the rear fenders. I'm probably not gonna use those at all. This extension up here, I was told from a friend of mine that when I did that, it changed the timing of the exhaust pulses. So then this engine, the power band is just gonna be way out of whack. So what I'm gonna do in order to, lift this up, I'm gonna be removing a segment and I'm gonna try to mimic what stock was. Unfortunately, I threw away that piece that was there, so I don't know what the actual measurement is. So I'm gonna cut it probably right here and then suck this guy up to there, bringing the whole exhaust up. Okay guys, I'm gonna end part 2 right here. Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed for part 3. I put out these videos just to give you guys more confidence to do projects like this on your own. I'm not a professional. I'm in my garage doing this stuff with the tools that I have at hand. So hopefully I inspired you to do something similar. If not, I hope you enjoyed the video and we'll see you next time.